Welcome to Finance 602, and this is Jessica Dunn. Today we'll be talking about our statement of cash flows. The statement of cash flows provides a summary of our company's operating, investing, and financing cash flows. It reconciles these cash flows with changes in our cash position and our marketable securities. Not only does it show us what happens with these cash flows, it also helps us tie together what's happened through the year by linking the income statement and the previous and current balance sheets. Within a company, there are only 4 ways to make money and 4 ways to spend money. Let's break those down right now. We have our sources and uses of cash. Our first source is profitable operations. So we can make cash by being profitable. The alternative to that would be unprofitable operations. So if we're operating at a loss, that is going to use up the cash that we have available. Second involves our assets. We could receive cash by selling an asset, or we could use cash by buying an asset. Third involves equity. So one source of cash for a company would be for the owners to contribute cash. So an equity infusion. If the owners of the company chose to put money into that company from their personal savings in exchange for common stock, that would provide cash for our company to use. A use of cash on the opposite would be a withdrawal. So if the owners withdrew money from the company, or if there was a dividend paid, that would be a source of the cash we have available. And finally, our last way to obtain cash is to borrow money. So if we borrowed money, that would increase our cash position, maybe for a short while, since oftentimes when you borrow money, it's to purchase an asset. And finally, our final use of cash is to repay cash. So if we were to borrow money, that would increase our cash position. If we were to repay a loan, that would reduce our cash position. So we can break these 4 different activities into 3 groups. Our first group here, number 1, are our operating activities. So these are sources and uses of cash that come directly from operations, operating activities. Our next group is investing activities. So anything that involves the purchase or sale of a fixed asset would be an investing activity. And then we can group the last 2 into financing activities. So anything that affects our equities or our debt would be a financing activity. Here's an example of a statement of cash flows. It's a pretty simplistic look at our statement of cash flows. And we can see here that some of these are positive and some are negative. And the negatives come into play when it's a use of cash. Otherwise, the number would be a positive. So, for example, net profit after tax causes our cash balance to increase. So it would be positive. Increases in accounts receivable, that's a negative. Even though it is a current asset, we allowed someone to take something without paying for it. They only promised to, so they didn't give us any cash. So it was really a negative in our cash position, because we then had to use money to purchase more inventory to make more goods, and we haven't received the money from the first sale yet. A decrease in inventories results in a positive effect on cash, because we've sold an item that we had previously held in inventory. So that really breaks down our operating activities. Then we can see our investing activities. This is changes in fixed assets. So if we were to purchase a fixed asset, that would negatively affect our cash position. So we use a negative sign for that. And then we have our financing activities. So this is changes in our loans and in our equity positions. So if we were to decrease our notes payable, that means we've paid off some money that we've owed, and so we use a negative sign for that. An increase in debt is a positive. It's increased our cash position. Sometimes this is the most challenging of the different financial statements, simply because the positives and negatives are sometimes counterintuitive. Because I usually think of negatives as being bad things, but really, an increase in accounts receivable, that means that you've sold your goods and services, and likely to a repeat customer who has a history of repayment. And so that's usually a good thing, but here we count it as a negative, which in my mind is, just a connotation. It's bad. And so it's just the most difficult for me to wrap my head around. And I find others have this same challenge. So it's best if you think about it as money coming into or leaving the company, which is exactly what it is. It's their statement of cash flows. But the negatives and positives sometimes trip us up. So you might want to spend a little bit of extra time reviewing this and quizzing yourself on what would be a positive or negative effect on cash.